Good evening from the National Weather Service office in Lake Charles. Over the next course of the next few minutes here, we're going to talk a little bit about the area of disturbed weather that's moving across the Gulf of Mexico and has been for the last 24 hours or so. But before we get started, I'm going to give everybody just a minute to get logged in here. Sometimes the YouTube channel takes a minute or so for the video to pull up, so I'm going to get everybody a chance to get on, and then we will get started in just a moment. All right, good evening to you once again from the National Weather Service office. My name is Donald Jones, and we're going to talk a little bit about the tropical disturbance moving across the Gulf of Mexico and be impacting us here over the next 24 hours or so. If you have any questions as we go through any of these slides or anything, you can email them to me on my email account shown on the screen here. It's donald.jones@noaa.gov, and we'll answer them live. We've got a little iPad here, and we'll go ahead and take a look at those and answer them. So any questions you have, just shoot me a quick email, and we'll talk you through that just as soon as we can. All right, let's start by taking a look at the latest satellite imagery regarding this tropical disturbance. The National Hurricane Center is still giving it about a 90% chance for tropical development here sometime overnight tonight. Now, there is a Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft currently investigating the system. And the deal with this particular disturbance, it has winds of tropical storm force. We've been getting reports from buoy stations offshore of winds of 40 to 45 miles an hour, especially on the eastern part of the storm here where you can see all these the dense cloud area. But the problem why they haven't been able to classify it as a tropical storm yet is because it doesn't have a well-defined center of circulation. This would be the equivalent of the eye of the storm if it were a stronger storm. You need a closed area of a closed center of circulation in order for a storm to be classified as a tropical storm. And the Hurricane Hunter aircraft hasn't been able to find that yet. Like I said, they're still investigating it at present. And if that circulation does develop, then they'll report that back to the Hurricane Center and they'll be able to upgrade it to a tropical storm here sometime later on tonight. Again, the Hurricane Center gives that about a 90% chance of happening. But even if it does, it's still going to be a very, very weak tropical storm. Even 45 miles an hour is still, you know, very, on the minimal end for a tropical storm. So we're looking at just a very disorganized system here. It's not something that's going to spring up into a hurricane overnight. This is going to be a fairly minimal tropical storm as it makes landfall here over the next 24 hours. But what is, as far as winds go, what it's going to mean for our area, we're going to be in, let me jump back here. This area here that I was talking about earlier with the very dense overcast, that is on the eastern side of the storm here. Your center of circulation is right down in here somewhere, maybe just a little bit southwest of where this X is. It's kind of wobbles a little bit, but the eastern side of your storm, that's generally where your strongest winds and your heaviest rains occur, and that's across the board with all tropical systems, and this one's no exception. As you can see, there's a lot more cloud cover to the east of the storm than there is to the west. And that's what's going to be getting into our area, this heavy rainfall and some of these gusty winds as well, depending on the exact track that this storm takes as far as where it moves. It could be anywhere in this red circle here. We may see more or less of that. But right now, based on current indications of where the track is taking it, we're going to be looking at winds anywhere from 35 to 40 mile an hour. These are gusts, not necessarily sustained winds, but gusts of 30 to 40, 35 to 45 miles an hour right along the coast. It's not going to spread inland very far. We're only talking maybe 20 or 30 miles here with those kind of winds. And then they drop off as you go progressively further northward. Here in the Lake Charles area, we'll be looking at possibly some wind gusts of 30 to 35 miles an hour. But that's actually not too much higher than what we've been seeing this evening. We actually had a wind gust not too long ago, just about maybe a half hour ago, of 30 miles an hour here. So 30 to 35 mile an hour winds can't be ruled out in this area or anywhere along the I-10 corridor for that matter. And pretty much from the I-10 corridor northward, wind is not going to be a big issue. We'll be looking at winds gusts even of only about 20 miles per hour or maybe less. But nonetheless, you know, especially with all the rain that we've had over the last week or two and the saturated ground, we could wind up with some weakened trees possibly falling, some tree limbs falling on some power lines. And that could result in some sporadic power outages, but not expecting anything too widespread in terms of power outages. And that's good because that'll allow electrical companies to get out there and fix those power outages pretty quick. So they shouldn't last more than just a couple of hours or so. All right, next thing we're going to look at here, these are the rainfall estimates from basically from now through Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning. And as you can see, the heaviest of the rainfall is basically we're going to get heavier the further west we go. This is right on the edge of Houston, way over here on the western part of this map at the 5-inch mark. And then the further east you go into our area, southeastern Texas and then southwest Louisiana, the lower the rainfall totals are generally going to be. Now, the exact totals are going to vary, of course, from location to location. It's going to be highly dependent on the exact track that the center of the circulation takes. But as a general rule, basically the further west you go right now, the higher rainfall totals we're going to be looking at. So across southeast Texas, that's going to be the highest numbers for our area, anywhere from 1 to 2 inches with locally higher amounts, maybe up to 4 inches. And then over southwest Louisiana, most areas probably generally less than an inch, but some areas could see maybe up to 2 or 3 inches or so. This is a little bit more detailed map showing this is our official National Weather Service forecast that just came out this afternoon. And it shows very much the same thing with anywhere from 1 to 1.5 inches across southwest Louisiana, and then anywhere from about 2 to 3 inches across southeast Texas. Okay, so in addition to the potential for heavy rainfall, we're also going to be looking at tides running higher than normal, and that's going to be due to that persistent onshore wind that is generally associated with any tropical system that moves to the west of our area. And as you can see, the red line here, these are the actual tides that we've seen so far today. The blue line is the forecast where it would be basically on a normal day. So as you can see, they're running about a foot above normal, and that could result in some localized coastal flooding. We'll get to that more about that in just a moment. But first, again, with dealing with the rainfall, especially over southeast Texas, we will have the potential for some localized flash flooding. Expect that to be very, very isolated. Just areas that get hit by probably more than 2 storms. I don't even think 2 storms will probably be enough to drop the kind of rainfall we would need for flash flooding. But as far as southwest Louisiana goes, we're not expecting enough rainfall. Again, we're only looking at probably 1 inch, maybe 2 across southwest Louisiana. So flash flooding from rainfall isn't really expected to be much of a concern with this system. All right, but like I said before, with that strong, 20 to 30, maybe even 40 mile an hour winds moving onshore, we will have a very small storm surge associated with this tropical disturbance. We're talking on the order of maybe 1 to 2 feet at the most. And in addition to those tides running higher than normal, that'll also produce the potential for some coastal flooding right along the beaches of Cameron and over into Jefferson County as well. Coastal flood advisory means that inundation of coastal waters inland causing life-threatening conditions possible. Not expecting it to be, significant enough that it's going to, require evacuations of areas. But at the present time, we're probably going to be looking at more what we like to call in this business nuisance flooding, where it may get to the bottoms of some houses, but we're not really expecting anything, like we would see with a significant system with a massive type storm surge. Okay, in addition, we also have a gale warning. Like I said, we've been seeing those observations with winds of anywhere from 40 to 45 miles per hour in the offshore waters. And so that's necessitated that we put out a gale warning. Now, if a tropical storm warning were to be issued for our area, we probably would not have to have the gale warning out anymore. But obviously, you don't want to do any boating in these kind of conditions. So definitely want to stay in harbor. All right, so that pretty much wraps up the little summary. We're going to break down now and go county by county and take a look at the expected impacts. And this is in no particular order, so just going to have to wait for your county or parish to come up if you're not within the first few here. We're going to start up in the northwestern part of our area in Tyler County. We do have that flash flood watch in effect. It's actually not in effect at present. It goes in effect at 1 a.m. Tomorrow morning, and that'll be in effect until 7 a.m. on Wednesday. Now, the majority of the rainfall is going to occur probably during tomorrow morning, maybe early tomorrow afternoon. But that flash flood watch is going to remain in effect until Wednesday, because we're going to have those lingering showers coming up out of the Gulf of Mexico that could potentially give us some heavy rainfall. So Tyler County is going to be looking at anywhere from about 1.5 to 2 inches of rain, and localized amounts 2 to 4. You're going to notice as we go through this that I've got two separate values for rainfall. This is the rainfall. The first value is what can be expected across the majority of the county or parish. The locally amount, that's going to be basically your maximum amount of what you can expect. So we wouldn't expect to see any more than about 4 inches, but even 4 inches is enough to result in some localized street flooding, especially if it occurs over a short period of time. We're going to be looking at winds up this far north. They're generally going to be only 10 to 15 miles an hour, gusting maybe to 20. And as with any landfalling tropical system, whether it be a weak tropical storm or a Category 5 hurricane, there's always the potential for tornadoes, these quick little spin-up tornadoes to develop in some of these cells as these bands move on shore. So there'll be a small tornado threat pretty much for every parish and county, and you'll see that on every one of these slides. Obviously, we're too far north to worry about any storm surge up here, and at present, we haven't heard of any kind of closures really anywhere in the area. So for Jasper County, same thing with the flash flood. These counties and parishes that are located right next to each other, they're going to have very similar impacts here. 1 to 1.5 inches of rain, again with the localized 2 to 4. Winds are going to be the same, 10 to 15, perhaps gusting up to 20 miles an hour. The continued small tornado threat with no storm surge or closures expected. Newton County right next to it is pretty much going to be a carbon copy, except we're expecting slightly less rainfall across Newton County. And again, that's because the further east we go, the lesser rain we're expecting to see. So Tyler and Jasper County is going to see more than Newton County will, but still localized amounts of 1 to 3 inches possible. Winds are going to be about the same with, again, that tornado threat. Dropping south a little bit to Hardin County. Same flash flood watch is in effect. We're going to be looking at a little bit more rain in Hardin County, 2 to 3 inches with locally 4 to 6 inches. Now, Hardin County is going to be one of those counties that's if it's going to flood, you're probably going to see it in Hardin and even Jefferson counties. That's where the greatest potential for flash flooding is going to exist here tomorrow. Winds are going to be southeast 10 to 15 with gusts to 20, and then again continuing with that tornado threat. Jefferson County, flash flood watch. As I mentioned, we also have a coastal flood advisory in effect. That's until 7 p.m. for Jefferson County. And again, that's for the possibility of that minor storm surge. We're looking at a storm surge anywhere from about 1 to 2.5 feet across Jefferson County. We're also looking at 2 to 3 inches of rainfall with locally 4 to 6. And again, Jefferson and Hardin counties, if it's going to flood tomorrow, that's probably where it's going to happen. There is a slight chance for a tornado still, and no closures at this time. A little bit further east, this is going to be very similar. Coastal flood and flash flood watches are up. We're going to be looking at 1.5 to 2 inches of rainfall with local amounts of 2 to 4. Winds 10 to 20 miles per hour, gusting up to 35. And storm surge 1 to 2 feet. Again, it's going to be right along the coast, and that's going to be more of a nuisance flood event than anything else. Cameron Parish, very, very similar, but not quite as high in the rainfall totals. Again, we're getting further east, so not expecting quite as much rainfall, 1 to 3 inches with possibly up to 4 or more. But with Cameron Parish being such a rural area, it would be very doubtful that 4+ inches would get into any population centers, which basically consists of Cameron and Hackberry. Winds are going to be out of the south, 10 to 20 miles per hour. Since they're right along the coast, we are going to be looking at some of those winds getting into the higher amounts that you're going to see moving onshore of up to 40 miles per hour. And again, that's only going to extend inward maybe 20 or 30 miles. It would be, we may see a few gusts into Calcasieu Parish, but most of it's going to be confined to Cameron Parish. And again, continuing with the small tornado threat, and the storm surge is pretty much the same as it is across southeast Texas, 1 to 2.5 feet. For Calcasieu Parish, as I just mentioned, we're going to be looking at winds 25 to 35 in the gust range. I don't think we're going to get as high as 40 just because we're, further inland than Cameron is. Still going to be looking at pretty much the same amount of rainfall, though, 1 to 3 inches with locally up to 4. And we do have that coastal flood advisory in effect for Calcasieu Parish, and that's going to mainly be for, the Calcasieu Pass, Calcasieu River, up in that area where you have waterways that will have the potential for some minor flooding. Going up a little bit further north to Beauregard, we're looking at the same amount of rainfall. Notice we're not going east anymore, just going basically from south to north. So this whole area is expected to see about the same amount of rainfall, 1 to 3 inches, with locally up to 4. And the winds are starting to drop off here, 10 to 15 with gusts to 20 to 25. But regardless, like I said, that small tornado threat will continue for the entire area. It doesn't matter that whether you're west or east or near the coast or away from the coast. You can get one of those tornado spin-ups in any little cell that's moving into the area. Going even further north to Vernon Parish, we're looking at probably less than 1 inch of rainfall. Some areas may see 1 to 2. Winds out of the southeast, 15 to 20, gusting 25 to 30. I'd be very surprised if it made it up as high as 30. 25 is probably even a little too generous, but it'll be on the breezy side, but it's not going to be enough to cause, any significant damage. Repeach Parish is pretty much more the same. We're going to be looking at generally less than 1 inch of rainfall, but some areas could see 1 inch or 2. Winds 15 to 20 miles per hour, gusting to 25. For Avoyelles Parish, again, pretty much a carbon copy, 1 to 2 inches possible. Winds out of the southeast, 10 to 15, gusting to 20. Allen Parish, we're coming back down to the south a little bit, so the winds are going to be a little stronger, 20 to 25 for those gusts, with rainfall of 1 to 1.5 inches. For Jeff Davis Parish, again, still coming back further south, 1 to 3 inches of rain and winds gusting 25 to 30 miles an hour. Evangeline, 1 to 2, locally 3 inches, winds 20 to 25. St. Landry, 1 to 2 inches with winds 20 to 25 gusting. Acadia, 1 to 2 inches, locally 3, 10 to 15 mile an hour, gusting to 25 to 30. For Vermilion, now this is one's right along the coast, so it's going to be one of those ones that's going to be looking at wind gusts upwards of 30 to 40 miles per hour. And that's generally going to be probably the southern half of Vermilion. By the time you get up, there's a good little ways getting inland here. The northern half of Vermilion probably won't see 40 mile an hour wind gusts, but 20 to 25 is probably reasonable. But 30 to 40 miles an hour right along the coast, 1 to 2 inches of rainfall, and that coastal flood advisory is in effect for Vermilion. Again, for that minor storm surge right along the coast. For Lafayette, we're looking at 1 to 2 inches of rain, winds gusting 25 to 30, but generally sustained 10 to 15. Tornado threat continues. Iberia, coastal flood advisory for Iberia since it's right along the water there. 10 to 15, gusting to 25. Now this one, Iberia Parish isn't going to be looking at quite as high a wind speed because, we're getting further and further east as we go here, and depending on the exact track of the storm, we're not expecting winds to extend that far out from the center to the point that Iberia would wind up, seeing the 30 to 40 mile an hour gusts that they're seeing further west. But nonetheless, there is still that tornado threat. St. Martin, 1 to 2 inches with winds out of the southeast, 10 to 15, gusting 25 to 30. St. Mary has that flood advisory being right on the water there. 1 to 2 inches of rain and winds out of the southeast at 10 to 20 with gusts to 35 to 40. And again, since St. Mary's right on the water there, they're going to be dealing with that storm surge of 1 to 2.5 feet. Iberia Parish, I don't know if I saw that in there, but they have the potential for some of that minor storm surge as well. So this is a summary slide here showing this one's Southeast Texas, basically breaking down everything we just discussed here into to one little graphic. And these areas that are highlighted, you can see these areas in yellow here. This is going to be your greatest potential for hazards. Obviously, like I said, we've got tornadoes across the board. Jefferson and Orange are going to have to deal with that wind threat of 35 to 40 miles an hour, and also that storm surge threat as well. And then we'll be looking at 2 to 4 inches of rain for most areas across southeast Texas. Looking into southwest Louisiana, again, the highlighted areas are Calcasieu, Cameron, and Jeff Davis for those strong gusty winds, as well as the low tornado threat and the small storm surge as well. And then finally taking a look at central Louisiana, highlighted areas include Acadia, Iberia, Lafayette, St. Martin, St. Mary, Vermilion as far as winds go, with St. Mary and Vermilion looking at the highest threats for winds as far as wind speeds go, up to 40 miles per hour. And then the low storm surge, but generally this far east, we're only going to be looking at about 1 to 2 inches of rainfall. And this pretty much rounds out the rest of the parishes here. Central Louisiana for repeats of Oils and Vernon. That far north, we're really not anticipating anything significant. This is more just going to be like a breezy but just typical tropical day for, central Louisiana. Nothing real significant in terms of hazards for that area. So, in summary, we are looking at the possibility of a tropical storm developing sometime later tonight, but like I mentioned earlier, even if it does develop into a tropical storm, we're going to be looking at a minimal tropical storm at most. It's expected to make landfall sometime early tomorrow morning, probably sometime between about 6 a.m. and noon along the upper Texas coast. So it really doesn't have a whole lot of time for it to get its act together before it's going to be making landfall. So we're going to be looking at a minimal tropical storm at best. Rainfall totals generally 2 to 4 inches for southeast Texas, 1 to 2 for south central and southeast or southwest Louisiana. We are going to be looking at tides running anywhere from 1 to 2.5 feet above normal thanks to those winds. And we also have that coastal flood advisory in effect for those winds as well, producing some minor storm surge right along the coast there. Winds up to 35 miles per hour along the I-10 corridor, 40 miles per hour right along the coast, and pretty much less than 35 miles per hour anywhere north of the I-10 corridor. And like I mentioned several times now, still that small risk of tornadoes pretty much throughout the entire day tomorrow, and probably into tomorrow night as well, if any of these storms linger through the night and maybe into Wednesday morning. Okay, one more thing we wanted to mention here is the Red River. It's obviously, I'm sure you're aware, it's been rising for the last couple of weeks here. It is about to reach crest. It is going to crest tonight at 36 feet. But with that said, we're going to have to keep in mind, depending on exactly where and how much rain falls with this system, it could drive the river higher if we get significant amounts of rainfall along or upstream of the Alexandria area. So stay tuned for that. And then also the Neches River near Town Bluff has pretty much crested at this point, or is right at crest, and it is forecast to continue to stay right at that level here for the next 5 days. But again, keep in mind, depending on how much rain we see, those numbers could go higher. So I'm going to go ahead and check now. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to just shoot me a quick line here at the email that's up on the screen there. I'm going to check and see if I have any here. I do have a few. All right. First one is, so is Iberia Parish going to be the same as a regular thunderstorm? Well, it's not going to be too different. Let me go back to Iberia Parish here. You are going to probably be looking at some more gusty winds, but that's going to occur whether you're in a thunderstorm or not. The sustained winds of 10 to 15 miles per hour, it's going to be a breezy day. if nothing else. It's not going to be too out of the ordinary from a typical day, other than the fact that you are going to have that breeze. A lot of times during the summer in South Louisiana, we don't have any wind at all. But as far as rainfall goes, it's just going to be scattered showers and thunderstorms. The only difference is that instead of it being more of an afternoon type event, it's going to be pretty much an entire day event. I've got another question. What is the potential impact for the Galveston, Texas area? I don't have specific information on that, but I can tell you, let me jump back to, I'm going to go way back to the precipitation here. Again, the further west you go, the worse shape you're going to be in. That's not to say that you're going to be dealing with, life-threatening issues, but down here towards Galveston, you're probably going to be looking at rainfall somewhere in the 4 to 5 inch range. And you could get locally higher amounts, upwards of maybe even 8 to 9 inches of rain, depending on exactly where it is. And since the storm is expected, let me jump back to the beginning here and take a look at the storm. It's going to be making landfall somewhere up in that area here probably. So you're going to wind up most likely in the strongest winds of anywhere from probably about 40 to 45 miles per hour. So you're going to take the brunt probably in Galveston of this storm. Let's see, a couple more questions here. What time could this become a tropical storm is the question. It could become a tropical storm at any time. Like I said, we do have Hurricane Hunter aircraft. They're out in the system right now. They're, taking observations in real time, and they're probably going to be out there all night. And the only thing that has to occur, again, we have the winds. The winds are strong enough from the observations from the buoys offshore. They are tropical storm force. What we need is that closed center of circulation. And what happens is when you've got a Hurricane Hunter aircraft going through a storm, what it does is it punches through it in an X formation. Okay? It jumps up this way, it crashes through it, it comes back, and it goes, and it looks like a big X. And what it's doing when it does that is it's trying to find that center of circulation. The way it finds the center of circulation, what it wants to find is winds that are coming out of the north here, out of the west here, out of the south here, and then out of the east, okay, because you get that counterclockwise circulation. And if it can find winds in all those different directions, then it knows it has a closed center of circulation. It hasn't been able to find that yet, but that could occur anytime tonight or early tomorrow morning. But again, like I said, it's going to be making landfall probably just shortly after sunrise tomorrow morning, so it doesn't have a whole lot of time to develop. Even if it does develop that closed circulation, it'll still be just a minimal tropical storm. Okay, let's see. I've got an email here. It might be a good idea to remind people about weather radios. That's absolutely true. Especially when we're talking about, these gusty winds and the rainfall that'll have the potential to knock out power. It's easy for you to now tune in and see me here with internet access and power, but if the power goes out, then your resources for getting the latest information become limited. So it is strongly encouraged that if you don't have a weather radio, that you get a weather radio. And if you do have a weather radio tonight, probably it'd be a good time to go check just to make sure those batteries are fresh in it. That way, if your power does go out, you can still get a constant source of the latest information from us here at the National Weather Service. All right, that is pretty much all the questions that I have here at present. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up this presentation. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to try to make this a somewhat regular occurrence as our staffing allows when we do have significant weather events. So be keeping an eye out on that if significant weather does threaten, and we'll try to do this on a somewhat more regular basis. But thanks for joining us this evening. If you have any questions after we drop off the air here, you can still send me an email. Again, it's up there, donald.jones@noaa.gov. And if you missed anything on this presentation, it will be available as a recording just as soon as this presentation ends at the exact same link that you used to get to it. And that'll be available for probably several weeks at least. So again, thank you for joining us this evening, and have a pleasant night.